Hi, everybody. Meteorologist Matt Gray. Hope that you are getting set for a wonderful Memorial Day weekend 2023. Welcome to this edition of the Brainstorm. Wanted to start off with this because we've been talking a lot about El Nino recently, and I read a very interesting paper just the other week, and I figured it would be a good time to bring it up now because of some other things that have been going on around the weather and science world. So we'll start off with this. As we know, El Nino's on the way. And for basically almost all of the last 3 years, as you can see in this chart, we've been in La Nina. Now, when you're in this La Nina phase, that means you have cooler temperatures in the East Pacific Ocean, and generally global temperatures are, well, not as warm as they could be. We usually see kind of the hottest years on our record come when El Nino's around. El Nino years will be hotter overall, most of the time at least, than La Nina years. And so it has been a while since we have seen this. In fact, you have to go all the way back to kind of the beginning of 2020, the end of 2019, to where we had something that kind of approached El Nino, but really wasn't officially El Nino by anyone's definition. And a 3-year stretch of La Nina, not only is that not uncommon, but it also was a little bit poorly forecast, and there is a reason why. And it has to do with this very interesting paper that I read just the other week, which deals with the fact that this 3-year stretch of La Nina may have been partially triggered by the Australian bushfires back in 2019 and 2020. Now, it's been a little while, and, well, you could say that a lot of major world events have happened since then. But if you can take your mind back a little bit, there were incredible wildfires. It felt like almost half the country was on fire. Australia. And you can see here on this chart, this study coming from the National Corporation for Atmospheric Research, so basically where all the weather nerds gather in Boulder, Colorado, one of the great kind of pillars of weather research in this country and around the world. And so this paper comes from scientists who work there. This kind of red area you see here, this is all of that kind of fire, smoke, and ash, and all the kind of different chemical compounds that come out when you are basically burning an entire continent, and how it traveled across the southern East Pacific and really wrapping around the entirety of the southern hemisphere. Now, of course, this ash from these wildfires and this smoke, it contains a bunch of stuff, but the big thing is that wildfire smoke usually reflects a lot of sunlight back out into space. That sunlight that can't heat the ground, can't heat the ocean, and there is, at least as you can see in some of these charts here, there is in fact, well, at least a notable kind of change here from all of that smoke and all of the material that was put into our atmosphere by these fires in 2019, 2020. And there is a belief here, using computer models, that this helped trigger unusually cold waters in the East Pacific, which of course is how you end up with La Nina. And so this may have been such a dramatic change over such a short period of time that it basically triggered one La Nina, and then La Ninas often end up coming in multi-year sets, and one tends to follow another until we get some much more dramatic changes. So, boy, I thought this was incredibly interesting, how maybe an event that seems so unrelated, as I kind of hit the back button here, with all the smoke and the soot and the ash released by these apocalyptic fires years ago, ended up perhaps affecting weather even here in the Pacific Northwest all the way up until, well, basically the end of this winter. So sometimes big events can have long-lasting and unforeseen effects. That's just how the way the atmosphere works. One thing can cascade and lead to another thing and another thing and another thing, and sometimes it just takes something very small to eventually lead to something very big as time goes on. It made me think a little bit more about some other things that have gone on here in the last few years that relate to this idea of, you put a lot of kind of smoke, you put a lot of ash, you put a lot of things up into the atmosphere at once, and it can lead to, well, some cooling, even global cooling. Now, this is something that is not going to lead to that, but it's going to bring me to a point here. So this, I'm going to try and pronounce this right. So this is a Mexico's most dangerous volcano, Popocatépetl. I don't know if that's right, but I'm not going to say it again. And so it's been erupting basically this entire month of May. They've had to shut down the main airport there in Mexico City. But it gives us a good idea, a great picture here, and kind of gives us an idea of what volcanic ash contains, right? So we've got water vapor. That's how you get those cloud-like shapes here, because water's condensing over that hot volcanic ash. You've got carbon dioxide, greenhouse gas. You've got sulfur dioxide. That's a really important one. You've got some silica ash. You've got other gases, trace gases, metals. But really the three on the top there are the ones that are important. Sulfur in particular, and that sulfur dioxide, very reflective and can, at least in large volumes, create global cooling. In fact, the most violent eruptions in recorded history, many of them in Indonesia in the recent past, whether that was in the 1700s, eruptions of Krakatau in the 1880s, all of these released so much volcanic ash and so much of that sulfur dioxide that they were able to cool the planet for even multiple years because of these extremely, extremely violent eruptions. Now, certainly nothing happening in El Popo here is going to be anywhere close to that, but we had a pretty big volcanic eruption recently. The thing is, it may have actually done the opposite. It may have actually led to some slight, temporary global warming. Of course, we all remember this at the beginning of 2022. Likely the largest volcanic eruption certainly ever captured from space, and certainly ever captured in real time. And that is the eruption near the island of Tonga in 2022. Now, this underwater volcano created this massive explosion, and volcanic ash and material went all the way up through the stratosphere. So we're talking many, many miles. In fact, they're thinking it could have reached about 60 miles above the Earth's surface. The thing is here, not a lot of sulfur dioxide, so no real global cooling effect from this. Instead, largely because it was underwater, most of what came up here was water vapor, and water vapor is also a greenhouse gas, especially when it goes into the stratosphere. And I'll give you an illustration here. So these are the kind of the ways, if you want to get some temporary global cooling, here's how you do it. Clouds, of course, can reflect sun back into space. You've got human pollution, which also emits a lot of sulfur and sulfur dioxide. That is probably less than ideal because of the health effects here. And then volcanic ash is the other one. Certainly we've seen temporary global cooling, as I mentioned before, with major volcanic eruptions. Of course, those also come with some very severe side effects as well. So it's not a surprise that people are doing experiments with sulfur particles, kind of how we try and make rain. We seed the clouds for rain. Some states in the country, some local agricultural agencies do that. This is also something that could be potentially an option in the future. And certainly people are looking at it, every time you talk about kind of adding things in the atmosphere, that's bad. You don't want to deal with that. But certainly nature does it all the time. And yeah, sometimes it could lead to some opposite consequences of at least what we've been doing, putting lots of warming gases into the atmosphere. Sometimes Mother Nature can do the opposite, at least for a little while. So yeah, a bunch of semi-unrelated things, but kind of tied together in the fact that sometimes Mother Nature can try and, cool itself off a little bit through things like volcanoes, wildfires, etc. So, a little bit of a rambling update here, but some interesting stuff that I've been thinking about lately. Hope that you found this interesting as well. If you did, hey, hit us with a like, hit us with a subscribe here on the 4 News Now YouTube page, and I'll talk to you again soon on another edition of the Brainstorm.